Hello, I'm Chris Hartwell, and welcome to The Heartbeat, the place where I talk about just a few of the things that make this little guy tick. Today, I'm going to be talking about Creed. No, not that Creed. Join me, won't you? So, prior to this film, there have been 6 Rocky films, all of them told from the point of view of Rocky Balboa himself. And in the first of those films, Rocky faces off against the champion, Apollo Creed. But over the next 4 films, that relationship changes and evolves, and eventually the pair of them become friends, just in time for Apollo Creed to die in the ring. And that happened in Rocky IV all the way back in 1985. So here we are 30 years later, where we're finally introduced to Apollo Creed's son, Adonis Johnson. And he's kind of starting a boxing career of his own, trying to make a name for himself, and to do so, he seeks out the famous Rocky Balboa to train him. And from there, as you would imagine, boxing ensues. Now, I wanted to kick off this review by talking about those pesky things called expectations, which I think is a fair thing to discuss considering, for all intents and purposes, this is the 7th film in a large franchise, and also, in less than a month's time, probably the most anticipated film of the year is coming out. I just think it's helpful to acknowledge what sort of role expectations have in our overall enjoyment of that film. Because what a film wants to do, and what it wants to be, is it wants to be the one that directs our gaze in a certain direction, saying, this is the narrative that I want to tell you. And that can be made difficult when we come in with our gaze already being directed or colored in a certain way because of our own expectations or hopes and desires for that film. And it can also be made difficult when other people are saying things like, Creed will blow you away. It's the best film in the Rocky franchise since the original, or you will leave the theater weeping like a baby. All this to say, this is just my word of caution not to get too caught up in the whirlwind of high expectations for this film. After all, it currently has a 93 on Rotten Tomatoes. My own high expectations aside, I did find that by and large, I really was able to enjoy the journey that Creed wanted to take me on. Going back to my synopsis for the film though I ended that by saying, and then boxing ensues, that really isn't a holistic description of the film's 2 hours and 12 minutes. This really isn't a fight movie, nor is it one long, great music video like Rocky IV. More than anything, this really is quite a small character movie, really about these two externally different men, Donnie Johnson and Rocky Balboa, and their need for one another. And by extension, the differences between our generation and the past one, and our mutual need for one another. And in that regard, I found the film to be rather successful. Going in, though, I still was very curious to see what the writer-director Ryan Coogler would bring to the film, being his first film was his very small indie drama Fruitvale Station, which didn't necessarily make a big sports movie the next logical choice. Though at the same time, there has been a trend recently of more and more big studios handing over the reins to their big franchises to these young up-and-coming directors, whether it's Mark Webb going from 500 Days of Summer to Spider-Man, Gareth Edwards going from Monsters to Godzilla, Josh Trank going from Chronicle to Fantastic Four, or Colin Trevorrow going from Safety Not Guaranteed to Jurassic World. And looking at all those examples, it does seem in ways that there are 2 distinct reasons as to why studios have been doing this. Either A, they're wanting that directors and experience to bring something new and fresh to a franchise, or B, they're wanting to kind of use that director's inexperience to boss them around and kind of get out of the process the film that they, the studio, want. Fortunately on Creed, it did seem like it was more the former than the latter. It was even cool reading interviews with Ryan Coogler where he would talk about his relationship with his father and how when he was younger, right before his sporting events, his dad would have him watch Rocky II. But it wasn't just the fact that he had a personal connection to the franchise, but the fact that he had something important to say from his own unique point of view about the importance and meaningfulness of father-son relationships. It was also fun to hear Coogler talk about how Carl Weathers on the original Rocky films was channeling a bit of Muhammad Ali, because it was very evident that he was directing Michael B. Jordan to do the same, particularly in one iconic moment. Speaking of Michael B. Jordan, I really did enjoy his performance as Adonis Johnson in this film. Like all sports movies, obviously the sweeping score and the thrilling choreography of the different fights or games that are being played do help to draw us in as a viewer, but more than anything, our engagement really rests on the shoulders or in the eyes of the lead characters. And you definitely see this in Sean Astin in Rudy, and you certainly see it in Sylvester Stallone in Rocky, and you once again see it in Michael B. Jordan in Creed. I just felt like I could really see him giving his all, both physically and psychologically. And then there's Stallone. Oh, Stallone. I think people sometimes forget, especially with his recent films like Grudge Match, Escape Plan, Bullet to the Head, or even The Expendables, that Mr. Stallone really can act. Now, let me temper your expectations just slightly, because I went into this film having heard that his performance was so amazing that he was sure to get a Best Supporting Actor nomination at the Academy Awards. And though there was one scene in particular that he brought tears to my eyes, I think calling for awards nominations at this point is just a little too extreme. Nonetheless, it was really cool to see Rocky's character kind of come full circle from the first film, where he started out as this rather lonely man who ultimately found human connection with Adrian and Polly, starting out once again here in this very isolated place, but finding connection once again with the character of Adonis. Now, quite a few people have pointed out how cool and impressive some of the longer takes are from this film, but if you actually listen to interviews with the director Ryan Coogler, it's very clear how intentional he was in those longer takes. And very similar to other long takes from other films, the good ones always communicate something about the characters, where they're at and what they're feeling. And you oftentimes see this in horror films as well, used to ratchet up that tension. It's almost like you're watching someone inflate a balloon, and as it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, you're just waiting for it to pop. Or in the case of a horror film, that something's going to eventually jump out and scare you. And so with Creed, the long take, which took place during that really important first fight, was really about more than anything, could Donnie, who at that point was still very untested, hold on? Could he go the distance? Could he endure in this fight that just kept going and going, standing up under blow after blow? As far as things that didn't work perfectly for me, there is something uniquely challenging about continuing a franchise that began almost 40 years ago. Just trying to meld something that's a bit dated with something new. And there were moments that I felt a stylistic and tonal clash like I felt in 2009's Star Trek, anytime Leonard Nimoy's Spock showed up. So in this film, as they tried to incorporate some of those classic Rocky tropes, I did feel the film straining just slightly to maintain that very gritty, realistic tone that they had fought so hard to establish. At the same time, even while they were trying to structurally keep things very beholden to the Rocky franchise, and especially that first film, it was the characters and what they were struggling with that kept things fresh and grounded this go-around. And in a fun sort of way, just as Donnie is fighting to kind of make his own name for himself while living in the shadow of his father, so this film was really fighting to make its own place in cinema while also living in the shadow of such a well-known franchise. So to close things out, one of the reasons why I love the best sports movies as much as I do is I think they do a great job at externalizing really internal problems. And that's also why I'm not bothered when Creed's second act is pretty much devoid of any fighting, because that's the time that we get to know the characters, and we get to know the wars that rage within them. And then in the end, we're really able to punch the air triumphantly with them because we know the final victory is about so much more than just winning that final round, match, or game. And it's for that reason that I will give Creed 3.5 out of 5. Nonetheless, I would still love to know what you guys think. How did you enjoy Creed? How does it stack up against the other Rocky Balboa films? Comment below and let me know. Also, please do subscribe. I'm going to continue to review films and television on this channel, and I would love for you all to stay up to date on all of those things. But for now, I'm Chris Hartwell. This is The Heartbeat. Thank you for joining me.